So that was an especially aggressive weekend of working, performing, hanging out with Bert, and still being where all my responsibilities needed me, you know?
Live from the Willie Nelson and Friends Museum Showcase in Nashville, Tennessee. It's Music is Funny. Musicians talking to comedians about music and comedy. With your hosts, Raelyn Nelson and Jonathan Bright.
I'm still smoking, I'm so high, I keep toking, I'm drunk, but I'm still drinking too.
Welcome back to Music is Funny. I'm Raelyn Nelson.
And I'm Jonathan Bright from the Raelyn Nelson Band. Back with another great intro.
Yes, because we are playing November 26th. We're opening for the Clarks in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So if you happen to be from Pittsburgh or going to be in the Pittsburgh area on Thanksgiving weekend.
Yep, come on out. It's going to be great.
Going to be an awesome show. We've been wanting to open for the Clarks for a while now. Also, if you're in Nashville this Saturday, I'm going to do a free yoga class at Yazoo Yoga. It's north of town. Go to my Instagram to see the address because I didn't memorize it.
There you go. And also, I've been noticing there's a lot of people listening and not watching. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't watch with this amazing countenance of mine. But if you're just listening on Apple, please rate, hit the 5 stars, and leave a review. That'd be great. Shall we get to it?
Also, Mark Norman said I had great hair. Dave W. Comedy. Dave.
Cool studio, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.
This is
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry. New headphones. Just making sure they're working.
This actually isn't a studio. This is just my grandpa's museum in Nashville. Are you in Atlanta? Where are you? LA?
No, I'm in LA. I'm in Los Angeles.
I see. And you have a cool studio too. Are you into? Do you like sports?
I do. Yeah. I have a bunch of I'm from Miami, so this is all my Miami nostalgia from growing up, basically.
Yeah, you mentioned Dan Marino on that podcast we did with Ian Bagg, and the only thing I know about him was Ace Ventura.
Raelyn is not what you would call not what you would call a football fan or sport fan whatsoever. But I'm with you.
Well, that's why they do things like the Ace Ventura Project, so they can broaden their reach.
There you go.
Yeah, I guess so. It didn't suck me in. Okay, so what is the first music you remember loving?
The very first. Not your first favorite band, but the first music probably as a kid.
Maybe something your parents were listening to or brothers or something.
Well, we used to boat a lot. So when I was a kid, I have memories of my parents blasting the radio, and it was a lot of stuff like, whoa, here she comes. Watch out now, she'll chew you up, right? Like Manny, like Hall & Oates, and a lot of Buffett, a lot of Jimmy Buffett. Miami actually had a really cool venue called Marine Life Stadium, or maybe it was just Marine Stadium. I don't even remember. But you could go watch a concert from your boat. So it was an amphitheater that was in the bay. And we saw Jimmy Buffett there, and I think we might have seen like Phil Collins and a couple other, big acts at the time there. It was really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
I also remember my mother had this is all coming back to me now. You asked me, this is something I would have never thought of on my own, but you asked that question. You don't think you have an answer, then you realize you have like 6 answers. My mom had a jukebox. So we had a game room with a pool table and a couple of pinball machines that my parents, set up in our house. And my mom had this old jukebox. I don't know if it had gotten passed down or if she bought it somewhere, but there was a lot of real classic hits in there, Leader of the Pack and a lot of Elvis and Johnny Mathis.
So 50s bass.
Yeah.
That's a trip. Learning so your mom's record collection was in the jukebox, basically.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. She had a lot of 45s in the jukebox, and she had good stuff from her childhood in there.
Right. So once you got to be more in your teenage years, what did you gravitate to? Probably not Jimmy Buffett.
Oh, I would say, I definitely remember when I was a kid, there was a few albums that I played on loop in my tape player. I actually really liked, I loved Michael Jackson. I loved Whitney Houston, and I had a Little Shop of Horrors soundtrack.
Oh, wow. That's an obscure one.
Yeah, that was what. And then I started getting older and getting into the Columbia House where you'd get a CD for a penny, you know, all that stuff. So I remember getting like, you know, some hipper stuff like Pearl Jam, and maybe started getting into a little bit of hip hop around that time. But the first time as a kid, I personally got very passionate about music was, I think, 6th grade. I went to a school that was you had to find a clique. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It was it was a magnet school. It was kind of in a rough part of Miami, and you needed to find a clique to survive. And so I ended up being friends with the metalheads. So
That's a good clique to be in for survival.
yeah, and they, you know, that's when the hair was popular. It was Poison and Skid Row and all this. I probably saw all of those bands in concert when I was at an age where it was like, hey man, your mom drops us off and then my mom will pick us up. You know, we were kids, and we went to Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses. You know, I'm trying to think. I mean, Aerosmith. I mean, all those bands that were popular at the time. I saw them all in concert.
So were you wearing the garb too? The skinny jeans and the bracelets and the big hair and stuff?
I probably had like a starter mullet. I probably had like a little rock. My mom wouldn't let me grow my hair long. So the way I got around that is I grow it a little long and back, but she made me like still keep it like presentable in the front, you know?
Right.
And then I would just wear like, you know, you had a t-shirt for every one of the bands. So I had a rocker t-shirt, probably ripped jeans. I'm sure we were really big on ripped jeans, and then like drawing on the jeans with Sharpie and, you know, whatever. I don't even know what shoes we would have worn.
Probably something black.
Probably.
Oh, the good old days.
Okay, so and then okay, so after that, what kind of music do you listen to now when you go to listen to music?
I swore I never would as a kid. There's so many things in my life that I never thought would be something. Like if you told me flat bill hats or something I would wear in my life, I'd be like, no, that's what old dads and nerds. Now flat bill hats are like cool, right?
Yeah, they're
like
cool.
if I ever thought I'd like pepper more than I like salt, I'd be like, what? Who does that? But it's part of like maturity and evolving, right? Like I like watching golf on TV. So with that said, as a kid, I thought country music was the worst. I was like, oh, mom, please, what is this music, right? And this is almost a little embarrassing, but when Achy Breaky Heart became a mainstream hit, I started ironically liking Achy Breaky. I thought it was funny to like Achy Breaky Heart, right?
Right.
So then that was like my gateway drug into more mainstream. And Tim McGraw is the guy who I think actually did it for me, because he had a couple bangers right out the gate. You know, Indian Outlaw, which I thought also was maybe like a funny little like ironic song to like at the time when I was at an age I was trying to find myself, you know. And then I started listening to some other Tim McGraw songs, and I'm like, oh man, I like this guy's storytelling, you know. Don't Take the Girl. Oh man, that's such a cool story, you know, story arc. And then I started giving country a chance, and then I got into country culture, you know, went to some concerts in South Florida, and I still like country music probably the most to this day. It's what I listen to the most. I still like the good old Jimmy Buffett, you know, boaters vibe, you know. I like old school hip hop, will always be a part of my life, and classic rock. But you know, maybe it's age, maybe it's just my taste. The only thing I'm not into is like the modern day, I would say like mumble rap, and also just like pop kind of songs, you know. Probably just because I'm a dad now.
Yeah.
So how do you and this probably involves how did you get your start in comedy? At what point did you think, like who was your first favorite comedian?
Yeah.
And did that inspire you to do comedy?
Well, you know, it probably actually has some music ties, because I always was intrigued by entertainment. You know, I always thought it was so cool, the pageantry, the power you have to make people happy, to express yourself through art. But there's never been a point in my life where I ever thought I could be a singer or a good musician. I played saxophone for a year or two in junior high, and I took some guitar lessons for about a year in high school, and I just don't have it, man. But when I found stand-up comedy, I realized, hey, man, that's a way you can express yourself through art and be a little bit of a rock star without having the talent of a rock star, you know?
Mhm.
So Brian Regan was a guy who I always use as an example that I saw early on in stand-up that I was just always blown away by what he did. Doug Stanhope was a guy when I was in college who was actually touring rock venues. And I saw a bunch of people walk out on a show on Doug Stanhope, and I go, I thought this guy was supposed to be good, but I didn't realize that he was fine with it. Those people weren't there to see him. They didn't know who they were coming to see. Like, he wanted to say what he wanted to say, he didn't want to make everyone happy. He didn't care about that. He wanted to say what he wanted to say, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say my earliest influence, though, comedically, was Saturday Night Live. I loved it. I loved Saturday Night Live as a kid. Dana Carvey was the big star at the time. I would try to do all the Dana Carvey impressions, and just seeing my parents laugh at Saturday Night Live was really powerful too, to see like, oh man, these people that I look up to and that I admire, I can make them laugh, you know, through, I'm never gonna, you know, earn their respect in other ways as like a 10-year-old, you know, like, or impress them. But if I make them laugh, I just did something, you know? So Saturday Night Live was a big impression on me, and it was pretty cool. Now as a professional comic, I've gotten to open for Dana and meet him and see him around town. So for a guy like that to be so influential in your childhood, and then now he's like, you know, one of your peers, it's kind of neat.
Yeah, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you start doing, like, how old were you? I guess you started doing it around the Miami area?
Well, I mean, the cliche answer everyone gives you is that I was the class clown in high school, and I always liked getting a laugh in school, and I always liked holding court at parties or at dinner, you know. And then I went away to college at Auburn University, and I started getting into writing. You know, I took some creative writing classes, and I started writing for a student newspaper. And I used to always like to make my articles kind of funny, but I had no idea that stand-up could be a job. I had no clue. And I chased my girlfriend, who's now my wife, up to Charlotte, North Carolina. And she's like, hey, I know you really like Saturday Night Live. I know you really like comedies. You know, there's this really cool place in town. I want to take you for a date. I go, okay, great. So we go out. This place called the Perch Sketch Comedy Club, right? Little underground comedy club. Been there for a few years. Had an underground following, but they were kind of, they needed new members. They needed some fresh blood. You know, they needed some you know, a little bit of a revamping. So they were having tryouts, and I didn't know that, but I went up to him after the show and said, hey, I'm a writer. I'd love to try to write sketches. Can I write for you guys? And they said, well, we write our own stuff. You have to try out for the group. We happen to be having tryouts this month if you want to come out. So I went and tried out, and I got in. I still, to this day, don't know why they let me in when there was other guys there. It seemed like they had more experience or whatever. But it was great. It was a great fit. I wrote sketches and acted in sketches for 2 years. Was addicted to it. Loved every minute of it. And then somewhere along the line, I was like, maybe I should try stand-up too. And the guy who was the head writer there would open up every show by telling the rules, how it's going to go. And he'd do a little bit of stand-up, but he did the same jokes for a year. So I asked him one time, I said, hey man, can I try doing the cold open sometime? He was like, please, go for it. Right. So I did it, and I only got one laugh, but that's all it took. And I was like, oh man, that felt good. It was something I just like. Sketch comedy was cool because you come up with something, and I'm sure there's some analogies with songwriting or whatever, but like like when I would write for the paper in school, or I was freelance writing even after school, after college, you think of something, you research it, you write it, it goes to an editor, it gets chopped up, it goes out to print. And then like a couple weeks later, someone reads it, they run into you, and then you get feedback and they're like, hey man, I liked your article, right? With sketch comedy, it's a little bit faster, where you think of something, you write a sketch, you take it to rehearsal, we all punch it up, you go buy props, you put it on stage, you get your laugh like almost immediately from the crowd. Stand up, I could think of something in my car on the way to the show that night, blurt it out my mouth, and immediately get feedback, whether people like it or don't like it, or need, you know, there's something there or not something there. So I kind of got addicted to that immediate, feedback, that
Validation.
that insight, like immediately, like, oh, it was just so cool to me. So then I started leaning really into stand up. And when I moved back to Miami to go into business with my dad, I convinced my girlfriend to marry me at that point. I was like, hey, let's go back to Miami. Then I didn't have time to be in a group or rehearsals or anything. So then I just started making sure my day off was the same day that the Miami Comedy Club had open mics. So I would just go do open mics on my days off every single time.
Wow. So how long were you just doing that? At what point did you start getting out and sort of touring around at all?
So I joined that sketch comedy group in, let's call it 2002-ish, 2002.
Right.
I moved back to Miami in 2003, 2004, 2001, 2002. Yeah. And then, I spent probably 4 or 5 years just a balancing act between working a full-time job, getting married, and rushing around either emceeing or hosting or the local comedy clubs or open mics or bar shows, just getting up everywhere I can. And then 2009, when the economy tanked and, the car business, I was in the car business, my family car business. That was my opportunity to be like, hey, I'm starting to get some offers and some opportunities in comedy. I want to take a step back from the family business and just give it a year, see how it goes. And everyone was very supportive, my family and our business partners, everybody. So that I came up with a 1-year plan, and then like 3 or 4 years later, things were going good finally. And my wife's like, what's the next step? So then we made a decision to move to LA. So I moved out to LA in 2000. We left Miami in 2012 in a 25-foot travel trailer with me, my wife, and my 2 kids.
Oh, wow.
And we were supposed to take a few months. I booked some work up, and we were going to work the road for a few months and then end up in LA. We had so much fun doing that. We ended up touring in the travel trailer for a year and a half.
Wow.
So we landed in LA at the end of 2013, and we've been here ever since.
So was that the first kind of extensive road work that you'd done outside of Miami when you like made that trek out, or had you been getting out? Because it seems like touring with your wife and 2 kids would be a little bit different than going out in your 20s and going from Miami to California and doing, you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I was working the road already, but it was like you get on an airplane, you go do a gig in, Georgia, staying at a, the level I was at is I was headlining like lower end comedy clubs, or I was opening for people at the higher end comedy clubs.
Right.
So one weekend you could be in a really nice hotel room in, Atlanta, Georgia, opening for some big act that sold a bunch of tickets. The next weekend you could be headlining some crap hole in Daytona Beach, and there's like bed bugs in your hotel room. It's like it's such a juxtaposition and a mind fuck. So yeah, I was working the road, but I was still figuring it out for sure.
And how old were your kids at the time?
When we went and took off on that trip, I think they were around. They were both under 5, so they were like 2 and 4, maybe something like that.
Wow. Holy shit. Yeah.
Yeah, they both had 2 birthdays in the trailer.
Nice.
That's crazy.
That is really cool though.
So how does one, when you're out there, like, what's the conversation? You're like, fuck it, we should just keep doing this. Then how do you just get on the horn and start booking more shows around? Like, how did you navigate that? Because I would imagine you had a pretty specific plan going out there, at least just the way you were going to go.
Well, it's funny how it just came together because, I had been working as a full-time comic from Miami for maybe, let's call it 3 years at that point, and we had definitely been depleting our savings, because we lived in a nice house that I bought when I was, had a career at a day job. So we had to have that conversation. What's next before we're out of money, And I said, well, you gotta, everyone keeps saying you got to go to either New York or LA. That's the big swing. So she's like, all right, well, let's go to LA. So I was trying to wrap my brain around how we were going to make that possible. And I happened to go to a comedy festival around that same period. I was really leaning into comedy festivals, which was working well because you can network with so many people and get more road work. It's just a faster way than sending out, DVDs of your act that no one's probably going to watch,
Yep.
So I went to this festival, and there was a guy traveling in an RV with his family. Granted, he was only going for like a few weeks. But it gave me that idea, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And then just by chance, that same festival, out of hundreds of people, I came in third place. So I won a bunch of work at clubs. And a lot of people don't really usually take the work, even if they win the competition, because it's not the kind of work that's cost effective. Like it's opening work for one of those lower clubs. You know, it's a foot in the door kind of. And I'm like, I don't want to go do a tryout weekend and spend a whole weekend trying out for a club,
Right.
where I'm gonna barely make enough money to cover my plane ticket, you know. So I emailed all the clubs on that contact list and said, hey, I'm more of a headliner than I am an opening act, which was barely true at the time. and I'm you know, I'm happy to work for the opener money, but it's just depending on whether it's cost effective. Let me know if you're interested. And then, you know, let's say half of them wrote me back. Then I said, hey, if you book me this specific weekend, I can, you don't have to give me a hotel room. And a lot of them jumped on that because those clubs love saving a few $100 on a hotel room. So then I went back to my wife and I said, hey, honey, do you know, I told you about that comic that was traveling in an RV, and we said that would be really cool. Maybe something we'd like to try. She said, yeah, for sure. I go, well, I just booked up like 2 months of work and it's all geographically in order. I think we could go do it. And she was like, I'm in. If you can make it happen, I'm in. So we found a travel trailer. I drove my grandma. I couldn't find anything that was like, makes sense. I knew nothing about RVing, nothing whatsoever. Other than I grew up on boats and there's some things that are similar, but my grandma called me one day and said, could you give me a ride to the doctor's office? Which, you know, she had people that gave her rides. So it was unorthodox, but I go, of course, grandma. So I went and gave her a ride. And that particular day, next to her doctor's office was a beautiful travel trailer that said for sale on the side. So I walked over and called the number, and it was perfect. It was exactly what we needed. So just kind of fell into our lap. And then I found an awesome person to buy my house in South Florida, and sold all my shit and like garage sales. And we hit the road, man.
Dude,
And
I'm so jealous. I want to do that so badly. So badly.
Yeah. To answer your question, though, it was supposed to be a 3-month trip that turned into a 4-month trip because I got into the San Francisco festival and I made the finals of that. And that takes a month if you make it all the way to the end. And then when we got to LA and my wife said, I'm still having fun, I want to keep doing this. I had just met somebody from Nickelodeon who I flew to Nickelodeon in the middle of the trip. I flew to New York to do a show called Nick Mom Night Out, which was a show they were doing at like midnight, where it was comedians talking about being a parent, basically.
Oh.
So I had a great set, and she was like, Dave, are you going to do some more shows around New York while you're here? And I said, you know, I can't. I got to get on an airplane at like 6 a.m. tomorrow because I left my family in an RV in Vancouver, Canada. And she was like, what? So I told her the whole story, and she was like super intrigued. So when my wife said, I want to go out and do more RVing, I don't want to get a place yet, I emailed that lady and said, can I send you a pitch, you know, for you know, some ideas? And she was like, of course. So they bought a web series from me based on us traveling. So it was great. I was able to book up. Yeah. We hung out in LA in the RV for like a month or two while I sent out emails. And then I started a new tour, and we shot video the whole time we went, and we sold it. I was getting 2 paychecks, one from Nickelodeon and one from the comedy club. So that's what kind of made it feasible for that summer.
Oh, that's amazing. Because I was thinking while you're telling the story, I was like, it's a shame this isn't on film. Turns out it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's somewhere on the internet. The Nick Mom channel doesn't exist anymore, but I've been putting them up on my Instagram from time to time whenever I find them on my files.
Yeah, you should. I can't wait to see those. He's at Dave W Comedy on the Instagram. What music were you listening to traveling during that trip? Do you remember anything specific?
Well, I'm sure a lot of country. You know, at the time it was fun because the age that my kids were at, we were starting to get them into music. So when they were young, we would blast a lot of Michael Jackson, you know, a lot of stuff like that.
What kind of music are they into now? Because they're
Oh,
like 10 or 11
I
now.
can't even keep up. Whatever's on YouTube is what they like.
Yeah, I hear you.
They like, all the Post Malone, and
Yeah.
something comes on the top 40 hits and they know all the words. And I'm just like, I remember when that was me and my parents were like, what is this? And now it's the other way around,
For
Yeah.
sure.
But yeah, it's funny, man. It gives me touring like that. I met a lot of musicians along the way. Comics, I think it's kind of a newer thing for comics to really travel in that way. And then now I'm lucky enough that I get to go out with a comic named Bert Kreischer.
Oh yeah.
And I open up for him a lot. And we tour in those big tour buses that, every tour bus we have, they're like, oh, this used to be the Eagles bus, or oh, this was Nelly's bus when he was out on a rap tour, or whatever,
Yeah.
So it's really funny. There's a lot of and we're working theaters too. So you go into the theaters and there's all these, famous bands and artists that have signed the walls and who's played there before. So it's really cool that it's come to fruition when I was a kid and thinking like, oh man, like I can't be a rock star, but I can maybe try to be one like a comedian. Now we're actually playing those same venues,
Yeah, and doing the exact same travel gig as all of the rest of them. Which you had a little more experience because you had done it in an RV already, so you were already ahead of them.
It's really funny, the juxtaposition, because there are so many similarities when we go out. Even during COVID, we were doing drive-in movie theaters.
I
So
remember hearing about those.
Oh yeah.
yeah, so we couldn't fly back and forth like we normally do when we tour theaters. We had to just get in the bus in LA, and we were gone for a month because we didn't want to get on airplanes. So that's like real road dogging it right there. And then I'm really into barbecue. I have a barbecue podcast called Meet Dave. So I was bringing a smoker with me, and so we didn't want to go into restaurants and stuff, and there weren't many places open. So I was cooking the whole time. We're doing shows. I'm throwing briskets on smokers. I got the cast iron skillet making veggies and steaks, and it was a trip. So it reminded me of being in the trailer with my family and cooking eggs out in the campsite in the morning for them. And now I'm with all these dudes who are my friends, and we're out, tour manager, we got the bus driver and all these guys. We're out doing it, man, but it's the same, but very different. And then go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and then to take it a step further, I just recently wrapped up a 2-month tour where I knew I was going to be getting my vaccine, and I didn't have anything on my calendar till August. So I didn't want to sit on my butt. So since I have this little fan base in the barbecue world, I put together a 2-month tour where I went out and I did comedy in barbecue restaurants around the country.
Oh,
And
wow.
I had to buy a travel trailer for that because that's how I know how to do it.
Right.
So I bought a brand new travel trailer. I wrapped it and put my face on the side of it, holding up a couple beef ribs.
Yeah.
And I went and had a blast. I didn't bring my family this time, but I brought 2 kids who just graduated from college, from film school. So they came and shot the whole thing for me. And, just really had a great time going out and seeing people and connecting with people and doing it in a safe way too, with smaller crowds and outdoor areas and patios and barbecue restaurants.
So who's got the best barbecue? What state?
Oh, how much time you got? I mean, the cool thing about barbecue right now is there's the cliche answers where people say Texas, Kansas City, Memphis, whatever. But I think you can get great barbecue anywhere in the country now, man. There's such a boom, like people have now discovered the Texas barbecue style, and they're doing it in Colorado, and they're doing it in Boston. It's crazy. So I really like, there's a couple places that stand out in my mind. Saw's Soul Kitchen in Birmingham. It's barbecue, but they have a little twist to it. It's soul food. So they have this sweet tea marinated fried chicken sandwich with a scoop of pimento cheese and Alabama white sauce on it. Will change your life, right? Some really good rib joints up in Memphis. We stopped and did a show with Malcolm Reed, is a famous YouTuber with barbecue. He's got a channel called How to Barbecue Right. We cooked with him, and he made a boneless beef rib with tallow drizzled on it. Insane. So good. And we stopped in. I even did a show for the employees at RecTech in Augusta, Georgia, which is a company that makes smokers. and they were just cooking. They did a whole hog. We did peanut butter jelly ribs. I mean, we were just cooking the whole time I was there, just crazy stuff. So the answer is everyone's got good food these days, man. The information is out there and people are using it.
Did you ever hit Dreamland, the original one in Tuscaloosa? You mentioned Auburn.
I did not, man. I'm very aware of Dreamland, man. I've heard it's great, but no, I wasn't able to hit it.
Yeah, it's basically just, well, they've added sides now, but years ago you would go, it was literally ribs and white bread, and that's all they serve. We call it the edible napkin because you just take the white bread and wipe your face.
Yeah, you sop up that goodness.
Oh yeah.
Now, I did stop in my old stomping ground of Auburn, Alabama, and I went to this beer. I still have this little thing. This is something my wife got me when I graduated. This is a little wooden model of the barbecue restaurant in Auburn called Byron Smokehouse, where I fell in love with barbecue. I ate here almost every day. And I went back and interviewed the owner for my podcast, and he remembered me. And we told some old stories. And he took me back and showed me, you know, the process of how they do some. Because back then I had no clue. I just knew I liked eating it. Now that I know about barbecue, I'm like, can you show me how you make it so good? And then I went over to my favorite chicken wing place, and I sell my own barbecue rub now. And I gave them some of my barbecue rub, and they made a special chicken wing with my barbecue rub.
Nice.
So that was really cool, full circle moment too, man, where the place where I fell in love with comedy and fell in love with so many things that are important in my life now, to see people that were excited to share stuff with me because of what I'm doing in my career was really neat.
Oh, that's awesome.
Do you like the thick hearty barbecue sauce or the vinegary sauce?
Not the vinegary. I don't like sauce at all, to be honest. I like to eat the barbecue without sauce, but then if I am going to sauce something like a pulled pork sandwich, whatever, I like the tomato-based sauce more.
Well, did you just say that you have your own sauce, or is it seasoned?
I have my own rub.
So is that, I don't know what a rub is.
Put it on before you cook it.
Okay.
Like a seasoning. Like a seasoning.
Yeah. Seasoning?
Yeah. See if I have one within. Thought I had one around here.
Sauce that you would rub on it, though, no? Or it's always a seasoning?
Like a dry.
I don't cook anything, so.
Yeah. it's like a salt and pepper substitute, basically. You know, it's like a rub has certain ingredients, and then you would sprinkle it on before you put something in the smoker, which would create that bark on the outside of the meat. Or you would use it like, I even put it on my eggs. I just use it to season my eggs and stuff instead of salt and pepper.
What do you have to say to vegetarians?
Good for you.
Amen.
My life, trust me, if I was a vegetarian, if I could have if that would quench my hunger, I would probably be a lot healthier.
I tell you, they try to tell you that jackfruit, that they have a specific jackfruit that they make into a barbecue. Have you seen this?
Oh yeah. Jackfruit is supposed to have the same texture as pulled pork, and if you cook it right, and then they put a bunch of barbecue sauce and mix it up so then it has the barbecue flavor. But I don't know. I think
it doesn't work. I was just gonna say I've tried it. It doesn't work. It's not great.
If you're gonna be a like that's why I don't get like the Impossible burgers and stuff like that. I'm like, if you're gonna be a vegetarian, that's
eat
fine.
Vegetables.
Then eat veggies, eat fruits.
It's kind of like non-alcoholic beer. I'm like, if you can't drink why would you want to have that taste in your mouth? Like, I don't understand. If I'm an alcoholic, I certainly don't want to have a beer that tastes like that. Send you right off
that doesn't have the alcohol in it.
I don't know. But anyway, I'm curious as to how, I'm sure the transition from getting into the travel trailer and was a big transition, but it had to be just as big after doing it for 2 years to actually land and get out and be in a house or somewhere. Like, did you and your wife, did your kids freak out? Did they miss the trailer initially, or was everybody ready to get the hell out once you finally landed?
Well, so the positive side was that compared to the house we had in Florida, in LA, it's hard to get, houses aren't big here. It's like everyone's close together. It's, especially we're on the west side near the beach. It's just unless you're a gazillionaire, you ain't gonna have a big house or land in LA. So the good thing was that any house was gonna feel like a lot of space to us after living in the travel trailer for that long. But yeah, it took a little getting used to for sure. It was mostly we were just having an address where we could actually order stuff and have things mailed to us, because for a year and a half we had to be like, oh shoot, I need to order this for whatever. Well, have it sent to Amanda's house. So when we drive through that city, we'll pick it up. You had to really plan ahead for all that. But honestly, the biggest lesson for me and the coolest thing from a mental health standpoint and everything was that lifestyle just gets rid of a lot of clutter and you can focus on things that are important, right? So when you're not paying, like, when you're in the same spot for a long time, you accumulate like all these bills, and it's like the direct TV and the TiVo and the Wi-Fi and these bills that you don't even know you sign, like home warranties, and you're like, I didn't even know I had all these things that I've been paying for all this stuff. And then you have all this stuff shoved in closets that you forget was even there. Like, it's not bringing any value to your life. So, when we really had to take a hard look at that and get rid of everything, it's like all you got to worry about is where you're going to fill up your gas tank next and what fun stuff are you going to do to spend time with your family between here and the next gig,
Yeah. And did you have to empty the shitter?
Oh yeah.
That's not tour bus rules on that. I'm sure you were allowed to go, 1 and 2 in the travel trailer.
Well, you try not to, because that you have to clean it out eventually. But it was, especially with 2 little kids, it was inevitable that sometimes, because in the middle of the night, if one of them has to go to the bathroom, most RV parks have nice bathrooms. You can walk in and just use the bathroom there, but not always. And you're not going to send a kid out by himself at 2 a.m. to go to the bathroom while you're half asleep. So, and my younger son at the time, he was like, 3 years old, and he was taking like poops like a 30-year-old man. I was like, we got to potty train this kid, man. I'm getting tired of cleaning this out of diapers and cleaning it out of the RV.
That's hilarious. Did anybody break that rule on the tour with Bert when you guys first just got on the tour bus?
All that meat you're eating?
Because it might have been the first time a lot of people were on a tour bus.
Or shitting through a screen door, I'm sure.
No, they made us very aware that you're not allowed to shit on the bus. We did have 1 or 2 emergency situations, and by we I mean Bert, and he learned how to poop in a bag. I forget what they call it, but you put a grocery store bag over the toilet and you poop in that, and then you throw it out the tour bus.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the fancy newest of tour buses, and there's no way to mask a poop smell, even on the fanciest, newest one. It's just, you can't shit on the tour bus.
And it's not cost effective.
I think my grandpa does.
Oh, I'm sure he's allowed.
They let him. I mean, or let him. I mean, it's his bus, so he does shit on it. But he's the only one.
I mean, I think if I
in a bag.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I do think that a lot of the buses these days have the technology to break that stuff down, and I think it's a lot more.
It still kind of smells, though. It still smells.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say.
Well, I hate to break it. We have 8 dudes who like drinking beers and eating meat, so our bus doesn't smell so great to begin with. It's like a frat house. There's dirty socks everywhere. There's leftover takeout food from the night before. I mean, we try to stay up with it, but it gets messy no matter what. It gets pretty funky.
Do you guys have the bigger bunks, or they call them the condo bunks, or do you have the skinnier ones?
We've had different things over the past few years, but it depends how many people we have. But we definitely we accumulate so much stuff. It's good to have a couple junk bunks where you can shove stuff and whatever. We've come up with so many games. We have something called penalty bunk, or if someone pisses everyone else off, you shove them in the penalty bunk and make them stay in there. And then we have different TV show ideas of like ways we can turn that into a TV show where you don't know what's in the penalty bunk and you get shoved in there, we've done American Ninja Warrior where we've tried to get to one side of the bunks to the other without touching the ground, and then there's the curtains are closed and you don't know which bunk someone's in. And when you go by it, they start trying to knock you down.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah.
It's like Wipeout. Fists coming.
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
Yeah, I used to climb all through the bunks and try not to touch the floor. That was one of the first games. Yeah.
Yeah, climbing through those bunks in the 80s, you didn't want to touch the mattresses, probably.
I didn't even think of it. I didn't know anything about it. Jizz Town.
Yeah, that's true. So when you were a kid, that was probably a pretty neat thing, huh? To go check out the buses and when Willie came through, huh?
Yeah, that was my favorite part. I just wanted to hang out on the bus. It's my kid's favorite part when rolls through town and we get to see him is playing on the bunks and just being in the tour bus because it's so cool.
Well, those kinds of things shape us, man. Like I grew up around the car business, and just going back into the parts department and seeing all the parts on the shelves, and just having like the run of a place like shapes our childhood a little bit. Like you see the behind the scenes at an early age.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So when you guys were doing that, the drive-in tour, were you doing multiple nights, or were you doing it like a band where you play that night and then move on to the next show and on to the next, or were you guys doing multiple nights?
We very rarely did two. We did sometimes we did two shows in one night,
Right.
but we very rarely did the same city 2 nights in a row. Maybe once or twice.
So you guys were rolling like a rock band for sure.
We were rolling, man. It was very aggressive actually with the travel and everything. We have a great bus driver though, and he makes it happen.
Yeah, that's the key.
But it was really fun because without being able to go do stuff, like we couldn't go out to bars or, really go do things during COVID. So the things that we came up with to entertain ourselves were just hilarious. We bought a pickleball net and some pickleball gear at a sporting store. And so whatever venue we were at, as soon as the shows were over, I'd pull the barbecue off the smoker. We'd crack the beers. We'd set up the pickleball net out in the parking lot and draw the chalk lines. And we'd sit out there till 4 a.m, drinking beers, eating barbecue and playing pickleball. And we're all competitive, so we're, 40-year-old dudes who are, living on a bus. So you're not really like, everything's tight. You're not really stretched out, and we're out there diving for balls and like giving up our body for a competition while eating like probably not the most healthy things for athletics.
Did you find yourself burning out on that? Because like when you get on a tour, like when you guys go and you're flying and everything, you kind of have to be on the ball. You're moving and you land and stay somewhere for 2 or 3 days, whatever, maybe rest, get bored. But when you're out on tour and moving around every day, you kind of get locked into a groove. And then by the end, it's like when you step off the bus, it's kind of like, whoa, what just happened there?
I mean, physically it was a lot just because, even if you have the greatest tour bus on earth, when you're driving as you're sleeping, your body always is like a little sore from moving while you're driving and everything, but it's a good group, man. Bert puts good people around him. So, I didn't really burn out from that standpoint. It was never like, you're tired of being around the people you're with or there's drama. Everyone really plays their part and is supportive and kind. I miss my family too. It's a long time to be away from my family, but for them, it's a little easier these days than I think in the past because you can FaceTime. It's so easy to call and keep in touch, and but I think the biggest thing is during the pandemic is we're just grateful to have work, man. The alternative was sitting home like so many people and not having an option for work. So, dude, it didn't. If I was burned out, I wouldn't say it out loud because I was just grateful to be doing something and utilizing that time, and also doing something that helps other people because so many fans came up to us or messaged us or were like, you have no idea how much we needed this. This really, to come be able to do an event in a safe way and just mentally release a little bit for a night. And also all the production people and people that worked at concession stands, the venues, they were all saying, Bert, thank you, man. We haven't had work in months. And, this gave us some work, so it was really cool to be a small part of that.
It also took a lot of balls on his part to take that on and, navigate. Because I remember early on when he was doing it, I'd hear some comedians on Podchaser on taking good-natured shots at him. I'm not going to play driving. But then you hear later on, once he went out and made it happen, people are like, hey, how did you do that?
Totally.
He threw it together and said, fuck it, we're going out and,
See how it goes.
Yeah, stuff that he's never done, not just the theaters, but the bus, all that stuff. So it is commendable that he took the shot and had the balls to try it.
Totally. We did 4 cities to start. We went and did a 4-city tour. And then after the 4-city tour, that was like the sample. And then after the 4 cities, we all had a little team meeting. And he was like, worked for me. Did it work for you guys? I was like, I had a blast. And so he was like, all right. And he told his people, he's like, book it up. And we ended up doing like over 50 cities by the end of it. yeah, totally, man. It was a big risk on his part, and it paid off. He went for it. And I even felt that with the little barbecue tour I just did, man. I had so many comics reach out to me who were like, "Hey, can I take you to lunch? I want to pick your brain on maybe putting together, not like barbecue, but whatever their thing is. Like, oh, I want to start putting my own tours together." Because I think everyone realizes, like, who knows what's going to happen? Comedy clubs are going to open and close and open and close, and not only that, but right now comedy clubs, the ones that are open, are very competitive. Because a lot of the acts that were working theaters before are now working clubs to knock the rust off, and everybody wants to everyone wants to tour at the same time right now. Everyone's dying to go out and tour, so booking spots at comedy clubs are really tough. So they see me out there doing shows, in creating my own venues. Everyone's trying to figure out how they can, what their version of that is.
Yeah, well, it seems to be right in your wheelhouse, because just listening to your story, it sounds like from the beginning, you've sort of been that do-it-yourself approach to the whole thing. Like, fuck it, we got to get it to LA. I got gigs, and just hustling.
Yeah, you got to look and see what's the goal and how do we get there. And something that always bothered me about the car business is that there was so much that you did not control yourself. So like I was working at a Saturn store. My family also had a Cadillac and GMC and whatever, but me personally, I worked at the Saturn store. Well, if Saturn doesn't come out with a cool car that year, you have to sell whatever car they send you to sell. You have to use whatever rebates they give you, whatever financing options they give you. So there's so many things that you can't control. So with comedy, I was like, I don't want to work at comedy clubs exclusively, especially when you're not like when you're not like the headliner or the famous guy who could call the shots. I want to be able to call my own shots a little bit. So a lot of the things I did was just me going, hey, I don't want to wait 5 years till I'm big enough to call my own shots. I want to, call my own shots. And if I do the tour the way I do it, then that's my leverage. They don't have to give me a hotel room. That's going to make them say yes, things like that.
It's genius. How'd you meet Bert? How'd you guys hook up?
Just randomly got booked to open for him one weekend at the West Palm Improv. And this is why you always say yes to stuff too, by the way, is, I was working at the car dealership and they booked me to middle. And at that time I would work a full day's work and then change in my office, get in my car, drive 2 hours up to the West Palm Improv, work 2 or 3 shows opening for somebody, get in my car, go back home, see if my wife was, needed help at 2 a.m. with any of the babies, get a few hours sleep and go and do it the next day all over again. Right. So, after I opened for Bert and we hit it off, this is over 10 years ago, well over 10 years ago. And he's like, hey, we're going to grab beers next door. I've never been the guy to turn down hanging out and networking and getting to know people. So I was like, all right, let's go get beers. So that was an especially aggressive weekend of working, performing, hanging out with Bert and still being where all my responsibilities needed me, and we just enjoyed hanging out with each other. And then over the years, I got lucky enough to open for him here and there just by chance, because we were both kind of, rotating the same clubs. And then when I moved out to LA, he was always very nice to me. Was always helpful and cool. And so then when he was getting to the point working clubs where he could start bringing his own opener, he asked me, hey, do you want to come do clubs every now and then with me? And I was like, yeah. So he had, maybe 3 or 4 guys that he would take out. So I'd go with him like once a month, maybe go do a club somewhere, spend the weekend hanging out. And then when he started doing theaters, he was like, hey, I'm about to do a theater tour. Would you want to come out on that? I'm like, let's go.
Okay, so before I let you go, I have to ask you about Papa Willie, my grandpa. When's the first time you remember hearing about Willie Nelson? Or if you haven't heard of him, he's a country singer.
Well, thanks.
He actually joined us today.
Well, I will say for sure, those memories that I was talking about with my parents at a young age, where we were on the boat or we were listening to my mom's records in the game room, I am certain that Willie Nelson was in those rotations back then. So I couldn't tell you an exact moment, but I definitely know at a very young age, Willie Nelson was definitely part of my upbringing and the music that my parents listened to. And the cool thing about Willie is that, as you know, I was mentioning earlier, as you grow older and your tastes change and everything, Willie Nelson has been relevant through pop culture, you know, for all generations, because he does things like Half Baked, you know, does cameos in movies like You Saw Dan Marino. You know, even someone who's not aware, someone who's even not aware of Willie Nelson is good to know Willie Nelson because he does cameos in things like Half Baked, you know, and
Right.
and he's just one of those people that I think super relatable across all demographics.
Yeah.
For sure.
Did you or did you not play On the Road Again on that long trip at any time?
Oh, I'm certain we did.
I hope you just say yes.
Worse than that, I'm sure that I sang it out loud as I drove multiple times, and my kids were like, "Oh," because how can you? That's the go-to cliche dad joke on any road trip. And we were on a 1.5 year tour, so I'm sure I was like, "On the road again," like, right? You know, we go down the highway, we're the best of friends, right? Like,
And it's funny every time.
It's so hacky. It's hilarious.
You got to do it, man.
Got to. I still do it when we haven't played for a while. I'm like, you ready to go on the road again? You know, so you have to.
Or even if you have conversation and you're like, oh, is that when they're on the road again? And it's just such a trigger for laughter now.
Trigger,
you know?
no pun intended.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
That's my grandpa's guitar. Anyway, Dave W. Comedy.
Wait. I just had a memory.
Okay.
We're pulling them out. We're pulling them out, man.
I remember being very, very young and hearing my mom and my grandma sing Don't Let Your shit. How does it go?
Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys.
Babies grow up to be cowboys. I remember that song being played in my house at a very young age at my grandmother's house. And I remember, because that's around the same age. I was at the same age when people were saying like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? A firefighter, whatever. And so I definitely remember that influencing me going, what do I want to be when I grow up? You know?
Well, if a cowboy's not cool, what the hell's left?
Yeah.
That's the one. I have twin boys and they're 14 now. But when they were little, that was their first Papa Willie song that they liked.
I think that was mine too. Yeah.
It's just cowboys in it.
Yeah, it says cowboy.
Yeah. My favorite one was I Can Get Off on You because it talked about cocaine and whiskey, and I got to say all the bad words that I wasn't.
Nice.
I can get off on you. Yeah. Anyway, Dave W. Comedy, thank you so much for doing this with us, and hopefully we can do it again sometime. And especially, do you ever get out to Nashville to Zanies or anything?
Dude, on my barbecue tour, I went through Nashville multiple times because I have a friend there that I could post up with, but I didn't do any shows there, so I want to come back through Nashville and do a show. Okay. So yes, I will definitely hit you up when we come through town.
Yes.
Yeah, and then come to the museum. You can just stay here. There's a couch here. You can just, sleep. There's no showers, but you've been in an RV before.
Yeah. You can shit in the bathroom too.
That's all I need.
There you go. Thanks, Dave. It's nice to meet you, brother.
Hey, you too, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks.
Dave Williamson is my favorite comedian.
Makes me hungry just going back and watching that episode.
You're a meat eater.
I am. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy your groceries.
Don't be an asshole.
I know your mama's name.
We free Britney, y'all.